If you've watched both seasons of Squid Game, you know that there are some pretty colorful villains. Well, watching it got me thinking, what if these villains were actually put on trial for their crimes? That's exactly what we're going to find out in this episode. First up, let's talk about Thanos, who is normally having fun while chaos is going on around him. So what would happen if Thanos actually survived the Squid Game and had to answer for his crimes? Let's dive into his first crime. In Red Light, Green Light, we start to get to know him better. He seems like an interesting and outgoing person. Thanos is a rapper who even has fans among the players. He flirts with a strange girl and even starts to come up with rhymes for her. It seems that player 196 has also taken a liking to Thanos. However, then the girl is suddenly eliminated. Chaos and panic among the players begins. Snipers mercilessly kill the participants of the game. At the same time, Ki-hoon tries his best to save the players by explaining the game strategy. However, Thanos saw this only as a way to eliminate competitors, and he was also a fan of illegal substances that can change personality. As a result, when the command Red Light was sounded once again, Thanos pushed several players at once, after which they were eliminated. This is how his villain arc began. South Korea is a country of strict rules. Under their laws, Thanos' actions are usually classified as triple manslaughter. In Korea, the punishment for such a crime is a minimum of 7 years for each person killed. In this case, that's 21 years behind bars, and that's just the beginning. The second crime is the substances he used. Based on what we've seen, it's safe to say that it's some kind of stimulant with a good dose, from which you can simply fly off into another reality. For this video, I researched a whole list of possible substances with such effects, and it's either something made up for the show, or a mixture of several substances. In any case, in Korea, the use and distribution of such substances is strictly prohibited. Possession of such a substance is punishable by 10 years in prison and a fine of 100 million won. And giving it to Nam-gyu is punishable by an additional 2 years and a fine of 20 million. The third crime is threatening to cause serious bodily harm. Thanos decides to find a new girlfriend after the first one died so suddenly. But player 380 is not impressed by his Infinity Stones. She starts laughing at him, and he says he will destroy everything that hinders his greatness. And then a guy named MG Coin, a YouTube trader, comes into play. Let's remember that Thanos ended up in the Squid Game because he lost all his money in the cryptocurrency schemes promoted by MG Coin. He was about to jump off a bridge, but then a recruiter showed up. And when Thanos wakes up in his pajamas, he finds MG Coin and immediately makes it clear that he hates it and begins to threaten it. His words about owning it and destroying it if it does not obey him are a real criminal threat. For this in Korea, they give another 3 years in prison. The fourth crime is betrayal. In the carousel game, the participants stand on a giant rotating platform. You need to enter a room with an even number of people. In the first round, he makes a decision without hesitation and saves everyone except one. When the room closes, he asks where Gang Soo is. He understands that his friend is dead and is angry, but does not realize that he is to blame for this himself. This is already an attack, and since MG Coin also received blows from him, there are at least 2 attacks. This is an additional 2 years to the term. The fifth crime is a fight in the bathroom. After a tie in the vote to end the games, tensions are running high. When Thanos crosses paths with MG Coin again, he loses his temper and a massive brawl breaks out in the men's room. Several people die in the brawl. Thanos almost eliminates MG Coin with his bare hands, but MG Coin suddenly pulls a fork out of his pocket and stabs Thanos in the neck. If Thanos had survived, he could have also been charged with attempted murder of a YouTuber and incitement to mass brawl. That's another 3 years in total. In total, Thanos would have spent 41 years in prison if he had won the Squid Game, and would have been fined around $150,000. And while paying the fine would be a piece of cake for him after winning the game, 41 years in prison would be an extremely difficult time for him. I think it's fair to say that even though Thanos was a villain, he made the series a lot more interesting. But he's far from the only villain in the Squid Game. We have the big guy Deok-soo, the recruiter who is also the embodiment of evil, and of course Il-nam, the creator of the games, who is also the host. But we'll talk about his crimes in a separate video. So, in this episode, we'll find out how long the villains of the popular series would spend in prison if they were actually caught for their crimes, and believe me, some of those terms will be completely absurd. Let's start with the recruiter. The recruiter, played by Kong Yu, catches up with unfortunate people at the most opportune moment when potential players are at their lowest point in life. Then he invites them to play a little game with him, but unfortunately the players don't realize that he is literally the god of this game. He essentially tricks the players with his skill, but he doesn't even need their money because the recruiter prefers to slap his victims as payment. He convinces the players to sign a paper that makes these actions legal, but with such bad intentions and the information we have as viewers, we are pretty sure that these slaps were giving the recruiter sadistic pleasure. Therefore, these slaps can be classified in court as causing minor bodily harm. We don't know how many slaps each contestant received, or how many players this recruiter has had, but since we have 2 seasons, he would be charged with 455 assaults in Season 1, since he didn't hit Old Man Il-nam in Season 1, and he didn't have to hit Ki-hoon or the MC in Season 2. He could get up to a year in prison for each person he hit, which would give him a good start at 909 years behind bars. But it's in the 2nd season that he really reveals his sinister side and goes much further. He knows that the loan shark hired by Ki-hoon is onto him, so he lures the loan shark and his assistant into a trap. As you may recall, the recruiter forces them to play Russian roulette, and what happens next is extremely brutal. It's murder, of course, which gives him life in prison. And besides, forcing them to play these diabolical games is an extra 10 years. Then we have his final crime. Ki-hoon comes home to find the recruiter in his house. This would be trespassing, which adds another year to his sentence. The recruiter finally loses his mind and wants to play Russian roulette against Ki-hoon himself. But this is where his journey ends. In total, he would have received life in prison, and an additional 919 years in prison. But the recruiter unfortunately did not survive. Next up, we have the bully, Deok-soo. When he wakes up with the rest of the cast, he immediately stands out by attacking player 67. As we know, they both have criminal records and even know each other. In any case, he starts out with a year in prison for attacking Se-byuk. In a flashback, we get more information about what Deok-soo did in the past. It seems he was involved in some illegal activities related to the casino. When he is told that the people from the casino want to deal with him, he ruthlessly eliminates his former subordinate. For this, he receives life imprisonment. However, his biggest crime occurs when all the players are finally given food. There is 1 egg for each player, but Deok-soo and his new gang decide to skip the line and take 2 eggs. When the last player discovers that his egg is missing, he goes to Deok-soo and demands it back, for which our villain eliminates him. That's an added bonus of life imprisonment. Then the next night, he goes on a massacre. For this, he could easily get the death penalty, considering how many people died that night because of him. Then there's his crime in the tug-of-war and the glass bridge. I don't know if it's fair to call the deaths of the other participants in those games murders, since they were also trying to eliminate Deok-soo in those challenges. But even without that, Deok-soo's final sentence is death, 2 life sentences, and an extra year for attacking Se-byuk. Moving on. Our next criminal is Sang-woo. He may seem like a nice guy on the surface, but we know that outside of the Squid Game, he was a cunning scammer. He pitched his company to a bunch of investors, took their billions, and failed to invest them properly, leaving him in huge debt. Sang-woo must pay 6 billion won in damages and serve 5 years for investment fraud. He is also very smart, which helped him beat the participants in each game. However, in one of the games, he meanly beat Ali, which led to his death, but this is completely legal since the rules of the game forced one of them to die, but in the next game, he really turns into a demon. On a glass bridge, he pushes a man, he dies, and this is a real crime. Then he stabs player 67 with a knife, and this is already 2 life sentences. There is an opinion that Sang-woo simply had no other choice, but Ki-hoon would clearly disagree. Thus, the final sentence for Sang-woo is 2 life sentences, 5 years in prison, and a fine of 6 billion won. And the last villain on our list is Il-nam, the #1 player from the first season. He is the mastermind behind the game itself. There is a lot of counting to do, but I will try to make it as easy as possible. He ran the entire organization, from the soldiers to the recruiters and more. This means he ran a criminal organization, for which he gets 99 years in prison. But the Squid Games started in 1988. So, there were 33 games, each with 456 participants, in each of which 455 players were eliminated due to his fault. So, he gets an additional 15,014 life sentences for each death of the players in the games he organized. Such a figure is simply mind-boggling. Compared to this, the host is just a newbie amateur. Of course, I also remember about the weapons and the trade in the bodies of dead players, but honestly, I'm too lazy to count. This character is definitely in deep trouble. Old Man Il-nam will go to prison for more than 70,000 years, more than 15,000 life sentences, and must pay almost $4 billion. What crimes did I forget to mention? Write your opinion in the comments, and that's all for me.